free your staff to focus on high-impact work while offering round-the-clock assistance to every student. With Element 451, you can deploy AI agents that reason, act, and provide support at scale, solving problems, analyzing data, and crafting personalized outreach instantly. These AI agents expand your team's abilities without replacing the human touch, allowing staff to dedicate their time to what matters most. Unlock the future of workforce enablement at element451.com. Welcome to The Application, a podcast focused on actionable takeaways to help you level up your marketing and enrollment management game. I'm your host, Dr. Allison Tercio, Assistant Vice President of Enrollment and Marketing at Siena College. Join me every Tuesday for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing and enrollment management. The Application is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal faves linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. In an era where higher ed institutions are competing for every inquiry, application, and ultimately enrollment, it's clear that the old playbook no longer works. Joining us today to talk about differentiation is Suzan Brinker, PhD, the co-founder and CEO of Viv Higher Education, and the author of the 2024 book, Pass Fail, The Urgent Need for Strategic Leadership in Higher Education. Suzan has dedicated her career to helping institutions stand out by crafting authentic, research-driven marketing strategies. Suzan, welcome to the show.
Hello, so glad to be here.
Let's start with this. What's one brand or campaign you've seen recently, in or outside of higher ed, that you think nails differentiation?
My team and I are obsessed with Purdue Global's brand, which kudos to Ology. It's my understanding that they worked on that with them. So we had nothing to do with it, but we love that brand. The overall Purdue brand platform is the persistent pursuit of the next giant leap. And then the Purdue Global brand platform is This Is My Comeback. So it still fits in with that bigger notion of improving ourselves and being entrepreneurial and making our lives better step by step. But then this idea of a comeback really focused on adult learners, and they use first-person storytelling, immersive photography, just really vulnerable and raw stories about people who thought that maybe they had waited too long or whatever obstacle was in their way. They had a child or they had a job that was too demanding or they didn't think they could afford it. They came back and finished their degree, and it's just incredibly inspiring, and they've pulled off a really, really great campaign.
I've got Purdue Global coming on the pod in a couple episodes, so thanks for that, Suzan. You didn't even know that
I did not
setting up
to tell them we love their work.
I do too. And I think what's interesting is it's not just what they say, but how they're saying it. I think that lends itself to differentiation. Don't you think? I mean, the way Purdue thinks is like a media company. They think they're like Red Bull, and how Red Bull became a media company and not a beverage company, right? It's a little bit like that.
Yeah, even the words, the persistent pursuit of the next giant leap, are unique and they grab your attention. It doesn't just say self-improvement at Purdue.
Yeah.
You're right. Even just the words that they choose are differentiating.
Yeah, and how they tell stories, right? Because how they tell the story makes them feel different. It does in the market.
100%.
So.
Much more authentic and raw, I think.
Yeah, totally. So before we go too far into how we can differentiate, because I know we're both like chomping at the bit to dig into that, let's talk about why is this important? Why is differentiation no longer optional in higher ed marketing? What's at stake if we fail to stand out?
Well, even just between 2000 and 2018, the average spend per student on marketing has increased by 500%. So way, higher than inflation. And I think that tells us a lot. And then there are some other statistics that I recently found, including that 98% of prospective students say all colleges and universities look alike to them.
It's like dagger to the heart.
And then they also, there was another statistic, which we know, right, that on the undergraduate side, students tend to apply to like 5 schools, 8 schools, upwards of 10 schools sometimes because their counselors tell them to do that. And I think if we look exactly like our competitors, then we have a 1 in 5 chance or a 1 in 8 chance or a 1 in 12 chance that they will choose us. So we need to differentiate. We need to look different. But there's another side to that story, which I think that historically, the size of the higher education market was always shaped by 3 factors, and the size of each individual institution as well, which was geography, where were you located, demographics, who were you typically pulling in, and then selectivity and religious affiliation. Sorry, those were 4 things: geography, demographics, selectivity, and religious affiliation. And in the last 20 or so years, people have been much more willing to move to go to college to a different geography. Religious affiliation has mattered less, right? Demographics have been changing. We all know about the cliff that's coming in 2026. And so the need to attract new audiences to even just maintain the size that our institution always was, and we know the most selective institutions are pulling more and more interest, means we need to attract new audiences. And in order to attract new audiences that don't already believe in what we offer, we need to be different than all of our competitors.
Well, and even things like the emergence of the Common Application has made it easier to apply to lots of colleges, and oftentimes for free, right? So the market has evolved, the audience has evolved. Talk to me a little bit about the audience, though. How has the impact of Gen Z and Gen Alpha, what impact has that had?
Well, what we're seeing from Gen Z and Gen Alpha is that they start shopping for college earlier and earlier, even as early as 8th grade. And so we just have a longer window over which we need to gain their trust and maintain their trust and interest. And then also what we know about those 2 generations is that they want authenticity and personalization at scale, right? They don't want to be sold to. They can tell from a mile away that there's just a sales pitch, that we are just being transactional in our interactions with them. And so what we need to shift to attract that new audience and their parents is more personalized, differentiated, and authentic storytelling. And that is not just one story told at one point in time, but a story that's told over multiple years, multiple occasions where they interact with our brand, multiple devices and channels. And that's not how we've been doing it in higher ed to date. We've relied on shorter term hits with our brand stories, as well as more transactional asks we're making of students.
Well, and we might be relying on messaging that we've been using for a long time, right? So what do you say to institutions that might still be leaning on messaging that's worked in the past and a brand that's worked in the past, but it might not be resonating at the same level with these new audiences?
Yeah, I think it's really tempting to continue to operate for an era in which we were founded or in which we peaked, whether that was 10 years ago or 30 years ago.
Hang
those
on
messages.
To that.
Yeah. That's a struggle that I've seen firsthand in board meetings and with presidents' cabinets, where they don't fully understand what the new generation is looking for, and they're maybe not investing in market research or just don't want to hear it. And so I would say that there is a really big risk, per my earlier point, that if you're looking alike or outdated compared to your competitor institutions, you're likely going to continue seeing declines in your pipeline and in your enrollments. And so really understanding, what is this generation looking for? What are they getting from us that they're not getting from the competitors, that we need to really amplify through our brand story and our program-specific stories that we're telling as well. Why are we losing them to competitors, and what can we do about that? And then telling those stories in an accessible, consistent, personalized, like I said, authentic way that doesn't beat them over the head with, we have great faculty and great facilities. Apply now. And they're not even at the stage where they're really thinking about applying. They're just doing fact gathering and they're trying to connect. They're trying to connect with the institution. They're trying to see their own personality mirrored in that institution and why should they come there and what's that going to do for them in terms of allowing them to enhance their lives and their goals.
It's just expected that we all have great faculty and state-of-the-art facilities too.
And that's not differentiation, right?
Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they're just like, they just assume that that's what's going to be part of their experience.
Yeah, those are sort of boxes that they're trying to check, right? If they're shopping for a school that has small class sizes, then that's not going to be the reason they enroll at your school. Or if they're shopping for a large state school that has a great football team, that's going to be the set they narrow it down to. But then beyond that, what makes the institution unique? So another thing I like about Purdue is that I think they do a really great job at balancing the unique and the universal, where, the universal is, everybody wants to improve themselves and get a good job after school, and they're looking for great facilities and faculty, check, check, check. Well, what's the layer on top of that you're not going to get anywhere else? And in the marketing, at least, you see real people with real stories told with heart. And that in and of itself is really differentiating.
All right, let's get into the how. Mm-hmm. Can you walk us through the key steps to creating a differentiation strategy for a college or university?
Yeah, I think there are 3 components to a truly holistic differentiation strategy. And the 3 buckets are market research, and then number 2, creative and messaging, and number 3, the activation of campaigns. And so in the market research bucket, with many schools don't necessarily have resources to hire an outside firm and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to tell them what they likely already know. So really boiling it down to what's going to make the biggest impact and letting you differentiate yourself, there are really 4 components. Number 1 is what I call brand anthropology, which is understanding what has made your institution unique in the past and what's always made you stand out. And how can we apply that to the present and the future? So an example of that is Elon. They graduated their old mascot, which was the Fighting Christian, and they became a multi-faith campus. And now their new mascot is the Phoenix. And the Phoenix is a nod to a fire that happened in 1923 on the Elon campus that destroyed the campus, and they rose from the ashes and rebuilt. And it's a really great example of brand anthropology because that resilience and that optimism and that entrepreneurial thinking are represented in the Elon Phoenix. So that's the first one. And then the other 3 are a little bit more straightforward, which is labor demand analysis. What do employers want from your graduates? Student demand analysis. What are students looking for? And then competitor analysis. Who are the 5 to 7 institutions that you're losing students to all the time? And why are you losing them? And what can you do differently? What gaps can you fill within your competitor set? And I'm always shocked by how few institutions truly know that. I mean, they tend to know, okay, here are 3 to 5 competitors, but do they truly understand why students don't choose them over that competition? And it's easy to do that research without even an external investment, in my opinion. So that's the research side.
You take such an academic approach.
I also like lists, like, here's the formula, And you would think that research would be embraced at an academic institution, but I'm still shocked by how few marketing and enrollment teams truly know that information. So that's interesting. And then on the creative and messaging side, really thinking about, okay, how can we make sure that we're brand aligned at the highest level? How do we tie back to just that brand message? And then from there, building messaging frameworks and personas that represent the students who are in your enrollment data for the last 3 to 5 years from a demographic, geographic, and psychographic perspective. And then creating the visual components, right? How do we approach photography? Is our photography stock photography? Are we putting ads and images together of buildings, or are we actually taking a psychographic approach where we're showing emotion on somebody's face? We're showing that inspiration or that moment where somebody is really having a light bulb kind of insight that really connects to people much faster than words. So as they're scrolling through platforms. And then video is really, really important to carrying sort of that brand message all the way into each persona, tweaking it, making sure that there's creative and video present. And then the third bucket, the activation piece, into digital advertisement, email nurture streams, print collateral, whatever it is that you're putting out in market, making sure that the story builds. Because I think a lot of teams probably feel like their ad creative is compelling right now, and they're using that ad creative to generate leads, let's say. And then the minute the leads drop into the CRM and get nurtured with an automate, right? Are you still telling the same story that caught their interest?
Yeah.
Right. And that's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of collaboration. And so the fifth kind of bonus part is culture. And how are you collaborating across enrollment, marketing, advancement, and other areas in the university to make sure that we're not doing these things in silos. We're doing these things in a really collaborative and well-coordinated way.
I like how you talk about the idea of piecing the story together too, because I think the other thing that people fall into is trying to tell the whole story all the time. Right.
Interesting.
Which is overwhelming.
Totally.
So I feel like we have to hit on all of those points that we find to be differentiating or special about our institution in every communication or every content that we're putting out.
Yeah, and then what you end up with is a bulleted list, which people aren't looking for.
That's not how you're deciding on a college, you don't think? A bullet list?
I don't, and I know you agree, but I read this book, Nexus, by Yuval Noah Harari, which he also wrote Sapiens, one of my favorite books. He's a historian, but always within the context of how did humans evolve and how did our brains evolve. And in Nexus, which is really a story about the evolution of human information networks, he talks about how we evolved to attach to biological dramas, which is kind of a dramatic term, but it really refers to things like sibling rivalries or love triangles or things that have made sort of the biggest stories throughout time. And if we send students a bulleted list, we're missing an opportunity to tell them stories about biological dramas, which again, dramatic term, but in an ideal world, the institution that they go to helps them build their belonging for their entire life. What types of relationships are they going to have? And I think Harari would call the bulleted list like a bureaucratic story that just, it does not compute, right? Nobody's sitting there. We imagine students to be so systematic in how they shop for college. Like they make a spreadsheet and just check off boxes, but it's much more emotional than that. And so I think storytelling and piece by piece storytelling is something that we have to pivot to collectively as a sector, like you said.
Think you know ChatGPT? Think again. Unlock advanced features like projects and Canvas at the AI Engage Summit's ChatGPT Secrets session on February 26th. You'll be able to implement what you learn immediately. This free virtual event is a must-attend. Register now at enrollify.org/engage.
Yeah, we can't make emotional connection with a bulleted list. I'm with
Agreed.
you. It's just not
Agreed.
possible.
And we have to make it digestible because the biological reality is that people have very short attention spans and they don't want to read a dissertation on why our school is the best school when they're just scrolling through their Instagram feed or whatever they're doing.
So just to make the point, we're not saying this is easy. It's not easy. There's a lot of things that, like, okay, it needs to be consumable, but also have an emotional connection. We get that that's not easy. Are there examples that come to mind of institutions that have been able to transform their brand successfully? You mentioned Elon. We talked about Purdue. Anyone else come to mind?
Northeastern is one of my favorite examples, which is a bigger institution. And they're a great example of brand anthropology, too, because they have always been a commuter school that is really obsessed with, or they were a commuter school that was really obsessed with experience. And so they have the co-op model that actually gets students a course release for 2 semesters so that they can go do internships or what they call co-ops. And Northeastern is now no longer a commuter school. They're one of the most prestigious institutions in the world with 10 plus campuses outside of the Boston area, really hard to get into, but still obsessed with experience. And they have never steered away from their brand. But if you think about the undertaking of taking a brand, we're obsessed with experience, or we're the experience university, and making it consistent for campuses that are in regions and sometimes countries that we haven't historically been in, and still making that make sense takes a lot of coordination and effort. And so in terms of how they did it, I think they threw a lot of resources at it.
Yeah.
And they hold their teams accountable for a lot. And ultimately it comes down to what I said, this culture of excellence and pushing ourselves and failing fast and doing the market research and collaborating across silos that makes this possible. Because otherwise, we're never going to be able to impact the whole funnel with consistent storytelling. We're just going to run out of steam, right? If the silos are too significant, or if we don't get the resourcing that we need as marketing teams either to really try something ambitious that's going to move the needle in a big way for our institution.
Consistency is definitely key, and not just in what we're saying. I got my doctorate degree from Northeastern. So
That's
I have
right.
to say,
I forgot.
Even in the learning experience in that very specific program that I was in, felt connected to what you were just saying about Northeastern. So they really live it out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an important piece to help. It's not just what are we saying that sounds different, but what are we doing that is different? I think that's really key for all of us to grapple with. Let's take a quick pause to talk about the application. If you're finding value in these conversations and learning strategies you can implement in your work, there's an easy way to help the podcast grow, and it only takes a minute. Here's how you can help. First, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Then, if you're enjoying what you hear, please leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. It really means the world to us. All right, back to the episode. Suzan, you've spoken about the importance of performance marketing and the idea of the 1% better every week rule. Mm-hmm. Can you unpack what that means and how we can apply it?
Our team is really emphasizing the importance of performance marketing because it allows us to break out of the vacuums of what we traditionally consider higher ed marketing disciplines. So you're going to have, in typical environments, you're going to have a content team, and you're going to have a paid media team, and then you're going to have a search team, and maybe a video team or whatever. It's all sort of separate, and then admissions has their own teams, and they do on-ground recruiting. And sometimes when there's a lot of international students, they have agents. And so everyone has set sort of their micro goals, and they're trying to work towards them. But who is ultimately doing the work of understanding how are all the different pieces going to support each other, and how can we integrate them better together? So a lot of conversations we're having with our campus partners are about, don't just give us a budget and an enrollment goal that we need to impact with the paid media campaigns that we're running. Allow us to understand your overall goals and what are the best methods to get at those overall goals. In some cases, a program might be too niche to really warrant a paid media investment. So can we think about how an organic effort or an on-ground effort could potentially be better suited for that program, and we take that budget and put it in programs that actually do lend themselves better to paid media campaigns. So that kind of thinking about performance of the whole engine of marketing and admissions, and sometimes advancement, depending on what the goals are, in more of a holistic sense. And then the other piece, and this is where really the 1% better every week rule comes in too, is to just consistently gather data, establish your baseline, try to outdo it every single week, every single month, every single academic year. And just because it doesn't happen in the first 3 months doesn't mean that you failed. It means you built a baseline, you tried a lot of things and maybe realized this really great idea that we were all super excited about didn't work. I'll give you an example. We worked with an institution that wanted to put their faculty thought leadership front and center because they have really impressive faculty. And for the graduate side, we felt like that was a really great differentiator. And we built content toolkits that were lead magnets for that institution. And while those lead magnets generated a lot of leads from organic traffic, the paid campaigns that we were running to generate leads from them didn't perform as well as traditional paid media campaigns would, which is not what we expected. We thought that running campaigns, paid campaigns to faculty thought leadership content that was SEO optimized and things like that was going to actually be lower in cost. And we realized that's not the case. And we knew that because we were monitoring the KPIs really closely. And we had a conversation with the team on campus. And we said, here's what we would recommend we pivot to. And then we pivoted again. And we just kept getting at what really moves the needle at the end of the day. What is going to ultimately impact that enrollment goal, not just leads and cost per lead, but that enrollment goal. And we've been working with this institution for many years. And so we feel like we are just so well equipped now to do things that actually move the needle. But there were a lot of learnings along the way. And we had data all along that we were gathering to understand what works and what doesn't work. And so we approach things from a performance marketing standpoint, but also this 1% better every week rule, which is really more of a culture rule than a marketing rule, allowed us to just get better and better and better at this because we were all on the same team. So I think ultimately it's a little bit of that notion that when we work together on teams, we can't blame each other. We have to establish really clear baselines and try to do a little bit better each week and celebrate the wins. And that's really inspiring to me as a leader of teams, but also as a member of teams when that mindset is present.
Speaking of moving the needle, what do you look at to know if you're moving the needle on differentiation? What are those metrics? What are those KPIs that we can look at?
That's a really great question. I think ultimately the ultimate needle we need to move is, are we growing enrollments year over year? From a quantitative perspective, that matters. Are we growing applicants year over year is the second one. Are we growing inquiries? Is the pipeline growing? But that in itself, to your point, doesn't tell you whether you're more differentiated. Maybe you just put more money in market, or the market is growing, or whatever else is at play. So I think the question about differentiation is more of a qualitative question, and serving applicants who are admitted and who are maybe they're going to deposit or not. What's going through your mind? Why are you choosing us? And finding those patterns, or why are you not choosing us? What is on your mind that makes us different or not? And testing those insights more quantitatively, if you have the resources and the bandwidth to do that, right, with surveys and things like that, could be interesting. But just really trying to establish, is what we think makes us different what students think makes us different? And I think that many institutions would find that there is a gap there.
I wouldn't be surprised either. So for our listeners who are in the trenches doing this kind of work, what are the first steps they can take to begin building or refining their differentiation strategy?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing is, do you know the 5 to 7 institutions you're consistently losing students to, and why? And do you understand what gaps your competitors are leaving on the table that you could fill, that you could emphasize in messaging? Most institutions don't have the full picture on that. So that's a really concrete step, I think, that they could take. And then the second really big opportunity that I'm seeing and that we're seeing in the market is that very, very few schools take that storytelling approach consistently across the funnel. And don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. You're not going to be able to just change that overnight, but how can you shift to more of a storytelling approach? How can you move from testimonials to true stories that are a bit more long form, that have an arc and tell a hero's journey, that are raw and vulnerable and connect with someone? Can you build a repertoire of 20 really impactful stories over the course of one academic year that then ultimately become the raw material for your awareness campaigns, for your landing pages and program pages, for your email lead nurture stream? Can you take video of those students and put it on YouTube and serve it to people who have been accepted but haven't deposited? Because those stories could become, like I said, the building blocks for everything else. And you can take 6 to 18 months to infuse them into everything. But getting the stories and really taking a brand journalism approach to those stories rather than a salesy testimonial plastering of testimonials across websites type of approach is going to move the needle, I think, for many institutions.
Suzan, thank you so much for taking, what really is a buzzword, differentiation, and making everyone see how imperative it is if we're going to succeed in this competitive landscape, that we really need to be thinking about it in a strategic way. Where can everyone find you if they would like to connect?
Thank you so much. Everyone can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Suzan Brinker. And I also have a podcast called Higher Ed Leaders, where I interview VPs and presidents. I do 12 episodes a year, and a new season is dropping in 2025, early 2025. So I'd love to have people listen in there. And yeah, thank you so much, Allison. Likewise, I'm glad that you're paying attention to this really important topic. It is a buzzword. It's going to come even more into the forefront as we navigate the enrollment cliff. And it's super helpful to have a thought partner like you to think about how do we really break this down and make it actionable for people.
And don't forget to check out Suzan's book too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'll make sure all of this is in the show notes. And of course, everyone stay tuned to the application for more strategies to level up your enrollment marketing game. Until next time, and thank you for listening. The application is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed tech shows that are jam-packed stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea, and they feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Day Kibbles, Jeremy Tiers, and so many other of your favorite higher ed leaders. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.